This is the story of a young girl who was a former skier but is now gone blind. She cat-sits houses for the wealthy class, trying to make some extra cash on top of that with some unethical means. When Sophie cat-sits a huge secluded mansion in the mountains, everything seems to be going well, that is, until three men break into the house, and Sophie only has a mobile app called See For Me which connects her to Kelly, the girl who will make the difference between a brutal death or survival. Let's begin. Welcome to Movie Recall. In today's video, we will be going through the 2021 movie See For Me. It's time to recall, let's get started, turn on subtitles, and spoilers ahead. The movie begins with Sophie, a young girl who sits alone. We see medals and other trophies that she has won for skiing. However, we see Sophie as she is packing some clothes and toiletries in a bag, and we can see that she is blind. As the TV shows the coverage of the women's Super G, Sophie listens until she can't anymore and turns off the TV. She picks up her hand carry and begins sneaking out of her room. Downstairs, her mother is also watching the same TV channel while Sophie tries to sneak past her. However, Sophie's mom notices her leaving and asks her where she is going. Sophie tells her that she got another gig. Her mother offers to drive her, but Sophie refuses. She asks Sophie about how she is getting so much money apart from being paid, and Sophie dismisses it as tips. She gives her mother no information about her latest job and leaves. In the next scene, we see a beautiful secluded mansion at which Sophie is going to cat-sit. On the car ride there, Sophie receives a call from her mother who wants to check up on her, and Sophie tries to hang up. Her mother gets enough time to tell her that she's sent the link to an app called See For Me, which might be extremely helpful to her. Sophie, from what we can tell, is her usual behavior, ignores her mother, and cuts the call. Deborah, the owner, is late for her flight and is in a hurry when Sophie arrives. She still stays long enough to tell Sophie the basics to get by, such as the security code, everything about the cat, etc. She is also about to give Sophie the home tour, but Sophie refuses. Deborah is skeptical at Sophie's response, but Sophie assures her that she will be able to manage. After Deborah leaves and Sophie is left alone in the mansion, she whips out her phone and uses voice command to call her friend Cam. Cam is the reason behind Sophie not accepting Deborah's offer for the home tour. She puts Cam on a video call and he acts as her eyes as they tour the house together. Eventually, they find the wine cellar, which Sophie is eager to get into. Inside, she picks up a bottle and Cam looks up its price. Basically, Sophie steals expensive wine bottles from the houses that she cat-sits in and sells them to make some generous extra cash, which she passes off as generous tips. Cam advises Sophie not to do this and asks her to put back the bottle. Sophie is in no mood to listen to his righteousness and they end up arguing. Afterwards, Sophie receives a call from Deborah who tells Sophie to activate the security system. Sophie remembers the code Deborah had told her earlier and turns on the system without any major incident. However, the trouble starts when Sophie steps outside to smoke and accidentally locks herself outside when the door locks by itself. She tries to fruitlessly open the door, but it doesn't budge. As she doesn't want to talk to Cam after their argument, Sophie ends up downloading the app her mother had told her about. The first person she has to video call to be able to see for her proves to be extremely unhelpful. However, the second person Sophie connects with is good at her job. Kelly guides Sophie around the house to reach a sliding door, which, when Sophie tries to open it, is closed from the inside. Kelly pushes her to keep trying, guiding her on what to do, and despite Sophie's initial inhibitions against Kelly, she succeeds. But this forced entry is picked up by the security system of the house, and Sophie rushes towards the keypad, stumbling and crashing into things, again with Kelly's help, to punch in the security code. Afterwards, Sophie saves Kelly's name as a priority contact on the app. That night, Sophie is in bed to sleep. She is listening to videos for blind people to ski, demonstrating how she still hasn't given up on skiing just yet. After she falls asleep, we see the darkness which surrounds the isolated mansion. Outside are three men who are planning on breaking into the house to steal. We watch them drive up the road and pick the main door's lock. Afterwards, one of them disables the security system and the thieves make themselves at home and get to business. They remove a painting from the wall and start unscrewing some screws on the panels. Sophie wakes up by a noise and tries to locate the cat using her phone. This alerts the men and they go off looking for the source of the sound. One of them eventually finds the cat and continues searching as they had not anticipated someone being in the house. Meanwhile, Sophie is also on the lookout for the cat, and she and the man looking for her circle each other without knowing. The man follows the cat into the room where the cat has run to get to Sophie, and he is about to come across the girl when the men working on the wall panel successfully roll it back to reveal a huge locker. The man rushes towards his companions to tell them not to make a noise as he suspects the house is not empty as they first thought. Sophie by now has realized that someone has broken in and panics. She overhears the men talking about the plan and in her stress knocks over a vase which crashes to the ground and breaks. Thankfully, the sound is covered by the drill and the leader of the group can't discern the correct location of the noise. Sophie grabs her phone and rushes to a hiding spot. Once there, as the man continues searching for her, she calls 911 to report the break-in. The on-call operator tells her that the response will take some time due to the remote location of the house. After the call, Sophie tries calling Cam, who doesn't pick up. In her desperation, Sophie ends up using the app again and calls Kelly. We see that Kelly is about to enjoy a pizza when she notices the call and eventually decides to pick up. Sophie tells her that there is someone in the house. Kelly tells her to stay wherever she is and let the thieves take whatever they want, but Sophie tells her that they are looking for her. She also tells Kelly that she has already called the cops. As she's talking to Kelly, the man continues looking for her and comes across her suitcase in the guest room. His suspicions are now confirmed. On the other hand, Kelly is guiding Sophie through the house until she comes up to the man drilling into the safe. Kelly tells her about him and guides her to a path that leads away from both men. But Sophie says she knows where the front door is and she runs towards it despite Kelly telling her not to. The man stops drilling as the other guy also joins him. Sophie barely has enough time to hide. They call their boss and tell them that there is someone present in the house. The boss finds that hard to believe, but tells them to keep up with the job and sweep the house. Sophie fully panics and once again makes for the front door when the other guy leaves and the drilling resumes. Again, Kelly tells her to wait and go slow, but in her fear, Sophie is unable to stay calm. She makes it out the door, but runs right into the third man, who gets a hold of the girl and hangs up the call with Kelly. Kelly watches the screen go dark as she keeps trying to call out to Sophie in vain. In the house, the man drags, kicking and screaming, Sophie inside. They check her phone and find out that she recently called 911. They contemplate what to do, as the police would arrive any second. They fear that if the police found out that someone was trying to break into the vault, the place would be under surveillance and they wouldn't be able to come back to rob the vault. This is when we discover that there are $7 million in the safe. They contemplate killing her as she has seen their faces when Sophie speaks up that she is blind. They check her ID and look her up to find that she is indeed telling the truth. They call their boss and Sophie offers to call off the police if she can have an equal share. The boss agrees and Sophie makes the call to 911. But despite Sophie telling them that it was a false alarm, the operator tells her that even then they are required to make an inquiry and a police officer is on their way to do so. After the call, the men all get stressed about what to do next when Sophie tells them that she will handle the cop herself and turn her away. In the meantime, Kelly, desperate to help Sophie, contacts the police to have them cross-reference 911 calls in an attempt to locate the house that Sophie is in. When the police deputy arrives, Sophie receives her. Initially, she doesn't let the officer inside the house until the officer insists that she has to do a sweep. Sophie yields and the officer walks in to look around. Sophie explains that she had accidentally left the TV on and mistook it for people having broken into the house. The officer gives Sophie a scrutinizing look. When she is about to walk out the door, the officer stops and whispers to Sophie that if there are indeed someone in the house, she can help her, but Sophie insists that there is no one there. Just then, Sophie's phone rings. The phone has been with one of the men, and they very quickly place it within reach. The officer has Sophie attend the call, which is by Cam. Sophie picks up and pretends that all is fine. After the call, the officer is about to leave when she gets an alert which had been reported by Kelly earlier. Thus, Sophie's lie is caught, and the officer takes out her gun, also calling for backup. She steps inside and calls out for the men. One of the intruders reveals himself and surrenders, saying that it is just him in the house. The officer begins to arrest him, asking Sophie if there are more men, and Sophie admits that there are 2 more thieves in the house. The other 2 men appear and one of them attacks the deputy from behind. She shoots at him, but is unable to take a good shot in the dark, and the guy overpowers her and ends up killing her. The men are worried about having killed a cop, but as they try to get back to their work, they notice that Sophie has disappeared with the cop's gun. Meanwhile, Sophie calls Kelly and uses her help to get out of the house. Once again, Kelly tells her to stay put and not leave the house, as she could get lost in the wilderness and the men could easily track a blind girl in the snow. But of course, Sophie does not listen. After taking a few stumbles outside, Sophie realizes that Kelly could be right and returns to the property. As Sophie sneaks back inside, 2 of the men have continued to work on opening the safe, and the third is out looking for the girl. Sophie walks into the greenhouse, but despite her best efforts, trips and falls, alerting the men inside the house of her presence. The man picks up a knife from the kitchen and makes his way to the greenhouse. Meanwhile, Kelly carries out her job to be Sophie's best support and tells her to arm herself with the gun, instructing her on how to use it. When the man arrives, Sophie is holding up the gun and is pointing it at the intruder, with Kelly's guidance on where to aim. But despite all this, Sophie is unable to shoot. The man advances and Kelly yells at her that he is coming nearer and nearer and he has a knife. Sophie finally finds the courage to shoot the man and kills him. After that, Sophie goes on to try to find the other man as the network connection with Kelly drops and they are unable to communicate. Sophie manages to find the man who had initially caught her and shoots him, but the guy refuses to die and pursues her as Sophie runs. She keeps trying to connect to Kelly so she can better guide her and keeps shooting blindly in the direction of the man. Finally, the call connects and with Kelly's help, Sophie kills her attacker. Kelly tells her to take a breather and to wait for the police, but Sophie confesses to her how everything is a mess and she could have left with the cop and spared all these lives, if only she hadn't been selfish for the money. Kelly listens in silence, but soon the battery of Sophie's phone dies, ending the call. Sophie, who proves more stubborn and determined in the wrong way, ends up going after the last guy who has finally managed to open the safe. He tells her that he has no interest in harming her and is simply going to take the money and leave, but Sophie shoots him when he tries to grab a taser off of the dead officer's body. After that, she receives a call from the man who hired the men and tells them that the job is done. Before he can arrive, Sophie empties the safe. Rico arrives and reveals that he is Deborah's ex-husband and he hired all three of the robbers to break into the safe to steal his money back from his wife. He tells her that Deborah did not know the safe or the money was in the house and tries to convince her to let him take the money. Sophie refuses and cuts off the lights in the house, begging Rico to pursue her. After running out of ammunition in her gun, she is caught by Rico and almost dies as he strangles her, but she gains the upper hand and bludgeons him to death. In the next scene, Sophie is recovering in the hospital and tells her mom that she's decided to try out for the Paralympics and plans to ski again. Her mom tells her that they will need money to buy the new gear, and Sophie clutches her backpack and smiles, implying she took some of the money with her from the house. Shortly after, Sophie video calls Kelly to give her an update on her skiing progress, while Cam acts as Sophie's guide, and this is where the movie ends. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.